All right, great. Well, welcome everyone to our July 2024 Portals Community Call. We have a great topic today. We have our same great host. And as we get started, I just want to make a couple of notes. First, we're recording today's event, so please do look for that as a follow-up. We'll be sharing the access to that recording. We're also taking your questions today. So please look for the questions block in the webcast interface and enter them at any time. Nick will be keeping an eye on that as he presents today. So it should be a great session. We had really a lot of interest in this topic, and no surprise, I think. But with that, let's get into it. Nick, I will hand things over to you.
All right, thank you, Jason. Today we've got we're going to be talking about Power BI, and how it works with Power Pages. It's something that I've been asked about quite a bit, and I'll tell a little story here in just a bit as to why it's taken me so long to make this a topic of a particular call here. But hopefully you guys will get some value out of seeing all these. All the different ways that we can integrate Power BI with Power Pages, and hopefully save you some of the heartache and troubles that can happen when you don't necessarily know exactly how that all works. So especially from a licensing standpoint. So all right, let's dive right in. We'll start off with a quick intro. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm the president and software engineer with Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based right here in sunny Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I am a professional engineer, and I've been working with Power Pages for the last close to 15 years now. My career began at ADX Studio, which was the company that originally built Power Pages and was acquired by Microsoft in 2015. So I've been working with it a long time. Engineered Code, we're a Microsoft partner that works with Power Pages. We've also got our EC Learn software, which is a learning management system for the Power Platform. So that's kind of our focus. If you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. You can also follow us on Twitter. There's also a blog. Any minute now, will be clicking publish on my latest blog post, my July post, where I talk about the public key that's used for the OAuth implicit grant flow. So you can keep an eye out for that. We've got our YouTube channel where we post the recordings for this, as well as our weekly tips that we put out on our YouTube channel, all really focused on Power Pages. If you check out crm.audio, you'll find the Refresh the Cache podcast that I co-host with George Dubinsky. Last night we recorded a couple new episodes, actually, so you can look forward to shortly having an episode that talks about the release notes, which we'll talk about in this call as well. I'll maybe keep the next topic secret, but a couple new episodes coming out for the podcast. So lots of ways to keep in touch with us if you are interested in all things Power Pages. All right. As always, just want to say and express my gratitude to Jason and the entire team at MS Dynamics World. I believe this is call 51, perhaps. I know recently we did call 50, so it's been a great partnership, and really appreciate everything that Jason and his team does to get the word out and help us host, and just keep the energy going and keep us on track here for the last 4.5 years or so that we've been doing this. So it's been a real pleasure, and happy to have him along for the ride. Okay, agenda. Same as always, we'll talk about our portal news, which we got quite a bit of because we had some release notes come out on Tuesday. We'll then dive into our topic, which is Power BI with Power Pages. We'll talk about the date and time of our next community call, and we'll leave some time, hopefully, for some Q&A. If you do have any questions, you can use the Q&A block. I'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully I don't forget to check on that. But I usually do an okay job of keeping an eye on those questions and deal with them kind of throughout the presentation. So let's get into our news, because we've got a bit. So first, the number one place usually to go for news is the Power Pages product team blog. That's where they announce kind of the new features that are kind of out. And so since the last time we gathered about a month ago, there's only been one post. That's not surprising. Microsoft just kind of finished their fiscal year end of June, so this is often kind of a quieter time. I know it's quiet in the summer for a lot of folks, and honestly, when I prepared these slides last week, there was nothing new, but there was one thing that came out, and that was a blog post on some of the file upload enhancements. So, and you'll actually see this as well in the release notes that we'll talk about here in a second. This was mentioned in the release notes for the previous wave, and so it looks like some of these might be available to start playing with. And so when we talk about the file upload enhancements, we're talking about uploading files via forms or multi-step forms. And so you'll see here with a kind of a list of new features that are all related to file upload enhancements. So one of these is the ability to set up the Azure Blob Storage via the Design Studio. So kind of by default, out of the box, you can, when you upload a file through a form, it's going to upload it into Dataverse. And typically, kind of the traditional old way of doing that is it's going to upload it as a note attachment to your record. Now, there are different ways of doing that now, but that's kind of the most kind of traditional way of doing it. Now, there is a limitation on the size of files that can go into notes. It's controlled by that email attachment setting. I remember the days when it was like 30 megabytes. I think it's in the hundreds of megabytes now that you can upload. But if you want really large files, the way to do that is and you don't want to consume all of your Dataverse storage space, there's been this option in there for a long time that you can say, don't actually upload this to Dataverse, store it instead in Azure Blob Storage. And what would happen is it would create a note, but that note was really just a stub record with a link over to the actual file in Azure Storage or in Azure Blob Storage. The way you used to have to set that up with the site settings, so part of these new enhancements is the ability to set up that connection string over to Azure Blob Storage via the Design Studio. So it's actually a nice new kind of WYSIWYG, or sorry, not WYSIWYG, but a configuration editor to set that thing without going into the Pages management app, and instead you can do it through a nice interface for doing that. So that's great. In terms of the actual end user experience, one of the big things is that the file size limit has increased. So you'll now be able to upload files that have up to 10 gigabytes via Power Pages. Again, these are if you're storing it in Azure Blob Storage. So you probably don't want to store a 10 gigabyte file in Dataverse, but if you have the need to upload large files like that, whether they're videos or log files, like these use cases exist where you need to upload those really large files. Power Pages now supports that. So you enable the Azure Blob Storage, and it will support you uploading files up to 10 gigabytes via Power Pages into Azure Blob Storage. You're also going to see kind of an improved interface in terms of the actual upload progress, whereas before it was kind of the old school, pick a file, click a button, do a post back to the server. Now you're going to kind of see that kind of a progress bar, that sort of thing, as well as the ability to delete. They've improved the interface for deleting and downloading those files as well. So improvements in how you set it up, improvements on how the user actually can use it, as well as the web API. So if you're interacting with files via the web API and those files are stored in Azure Blob Storage, the web API has enhanced support for that. To be honest with you, I don't know exactly what all the details are, like what it couldn't do before and what it does do now. I just know that they have kind of basically put in some real support for blob storage files via the web API. So if you are leveraging that Azure Blob Storage integration with Power Pages and you're using the web API, you're going to have some better support there as well. So yeah, that's the kind of the big news that's kind of out there in terms of what's there. I think it's available. I didn't see a preview note on it. I'm honestly not sure if it's in preview or not. But those features are that was announced recently in on the Power Pages product blog. All right, and what else do we have? We have the release wave. So if you're not kind of familiar yet with how Microsoft kind of does its release cycles, they basically break the year up into 6-month waves. So they've got wave 1, which occurs between April and September, and then they've got wave 2, which occurs between October and March. So the release wave 1 we are currently in release wave 1. It would have started in April and it will go till the end of September. Now, in advance of the release wave, Microsoft releases the release wave plan. So the next release wave to begin will start in October, and so that will be release wave 2. And what they've just released is the plan for that release wave. Now it is a plan. It is not a promise. It is not a guarantee. It's a here. This is what we think is going to happen. So it's kind of our best view into the future of what should we expect to see between October and October and March. So October 2024 to March 2025. What should we expect to see in that 6-month time frame? And so Microsoft releases that for the Power Platform. They release it for Dynamics 365. And those release notes came out on Tuesday. So specifically related to the Power Pages, what do we see? So we see kind of in that Copilot area, there's some AI enhancements for the community template. And this is mostly around forums. So if you're leveraging forums or want to leverage forums in that community template, they have automated moderation. So if people are putting up posts that appear to be spam or don't meet your community guidelines, you can enable AI moderation. So it's automatically going to remove those posts from your forums. They've also got forum thread summary. So if you have a particular forum thread that goes on for pages and pages and pages, you don't want users to have to kind of browse through all those pages to kind of get the gist of what are people discussing, what was the question, what was the answer. You can enable the forum thread summary, and AI is going to go through all of the answers in that forum and in that particular thread and provide you with a nice brief summary that you could probably display at the top of the forum thread, as well as it's going to be great for search and that sort of thing. In addition, the third feature in there is enhanced AI search for searching through things like the forums. So if you're using that community template, they have kind of an AI enhanced search as well. So that's kind of the stuff in the Copilot area. Related to Power FX, like we now have Power FX in Power Pages. So the Copilot in VS Code can be used to generate Power FX commands. It can also be used to explain Power FX commands. So that's similar to what already exists for HTML, JavaScript, Liquid. That's already there. There's also support for Power FX in the web template components. So if you ever created one of those manifest files for your web templates so that people in the design studio can reference a web template as a component, there's going to be support for Power FX in there as well. What else is on the list? So Microsoft External Entra ID setup wizard. So if you haven't heard of Microsoft External Entra ID, it is the next iteration of Microsoft's kind of external ID product. So currently, like the product we've been using for years is called Azure AD B2C. So External Entra ID is not like the new name for B2C. It is a separate new product. So I mean, B2C, does that mean B2C is going away? Well, probably not anytime soon, but if you're starting a new project right now, you're probably going to go with External Entra ID because that seems to be the new kid on the block. So Microsoft actually just recently announced that in July, so at some point this month, what will be in preview is the ability to set up External Entra ID for Power Pages, and that will be kind of a simple interface that put in all your settings. Now, what they're announcing as part of the release wave will be a wizard that will help you actually do the setup on the External Entra ID side. So if you've been around Power Pages for a while, you may remember that there used to be like a wizard for B2C that would actually go off and create some of the B2C resources for you automatically. So you didn't have to jump around between a bunch of admin centers to set up B2C. That didn't kind of make it into Power Pages. It was kind of in preview for a while, but like the old interface is still kind of what's there. So that kind of updated interface, that one kind of single wizard that lets you set up everything from a single screen, that's going to be what's coming for External Entra ID as well. The ability to control which external auth providers are allowed in a particular tenant. So you can say, I don't want Facebook anywhere, or I want to turn on this or that at the tenant level, or as a global admin, kind of in the Power Pages in the Power Platform Admin Center. So as a kind of more global admin, not in the specific settings for an individual site, but more at an admin level, you'll be able to control those auth providers, as well as some of those file upload enhancements that we just talked about. A lot of those, I believe, are going to be in preview, so those are going GA at some point during that release wave. In addition to the ones we've talked about, it looks like there also going to be some virus scan capabilities. So I know that's a big ask a lot of times is if I allow my users to upload a file, I got to scan those for viruses. There are, ways to do that, but nothing's really out of the box. So it looks like some scanning capabilities are coming as well. So that's at a very quickly the release wave. Again, if we do have a podcast with George Dubinsky and myself, the Refresh the Cache podcast, where we're going to go into, or where we went into kind of a little bit more detail than what I just did. So if you're interested in more on the release notes, please check out that podcast. It should be out shortly. Okay, that's what we've got for news. Let's talk about our topic of the day, which is Power BI with Power Pages. Okay, just quick water break there. Now we're good to go. So, Power BI. So Power BI is one of the friends of Power Pages, all within that Power Platform. Within Power BI, you can create reports and dashboards, and the good news is those can be embedded on a Power Pages site. Now Power BI itself has capabilities that allow you to embed it, and you can kind of iframe things, or So what's special about what you can do with Power Pages is that there's a liquid command, there's a liquid tag called Power BI that allows you to embed things from Power BI on your Power Pages site. In order to use that liquid command, you need to enable the Power BI integration in the Power Platform Admin Center. So within the Power Platform Admin Center, there's essentially a toggle that says Enable Power BI Visualizations. Now, if you're kind of more on the low-code, no-code side, and you don't really want to write some liquid, and it can be a little bit challenging for the Power BI stuff because you have to get the right URL for your Power BI reports and dashboards. It can be a little complicated. The good news is that the Design Studio, the Power Pages Design Studio, actually has a UI where you can add a Power BI report or dashboard as one of the components in the kind of WYSIWYG editor. So you don't actually have to write that liquid for the most part yourself. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. You can use the Power Pages Design Studio to just embed the Power BI report right onto your Power Pages site. So that all sounds great. I can write things, I can create Power BI reports, I can embed them in Power Pages. It's all good news, right? There's nothing we have to worry about. If only it was that simple. So what often gets overlooked is, there's that box. If you can check the box, yes, Power Pages and Power BI work together. But what's often overlooked, and often, it's overlooked to the detriment of the project, is licensing and authentication. So there is really there's not a lot of special magic when it comes to like this integration. There isn't any special licensing that says, hey, because you have Power Pages, you are entitled to anything special from Power BI. There's no embedded licensing for Power BI as part of Power Pages. So when you add Power BI to your Power Pages site, you have to consider what the licensing implications are. So there's essentially three different methods. There's three different options when it comes to publishing or adding a Power BI report or dashboard to your Power Pages site. The options are you can either use the publish to web, you can embed for your organization, or you can embed for your customers. And I'll go into what kind of each one of those options mean. Before we do that, I do want to emphasize, I personally am in no way a Power BI expert. I'm guessing there are many people on this call that could ask very complicated questions about Power BI itself. You will see that the report that I actually build here that I'll show you is like as simple and as basic as it gets. I don't do Power BI for a living. I don't do it on a day-to-day basis. I know enough that I can create a sample report so that I can actually use it and show it in a demo. But beyond that, I can't answer your complicated Power BI questions, but I can show you how it integrates with Power Pages. So if you already know Power BI, great. I can show you how it kind of ties into Power Pages, but I probably can't answer your more complicated Power BI questions. So let's talk about the three options we have. So publish to web. This is easy. There's really no licensing required for the users. And this is essentially, it's kind of something built into the Power BI license that I think is it Power BI Pro, I think is what it's called, where you can upload your report to Power BI, web.powerbi.com, and you can say, hey, I want to right click, I want to publish this to web, and it gives you a URL that you can essentially embed as an iframe wherever you want. And anyone can get that URL, anyone can see that report. There's no security for it. There's no licensing requirement, so anyone can look at it, but there's no security. Anyone who knows that URL can get it. This is what I think a lot of people think the Power BI integration with Power Pages is they just think, oh, I can embed this, and then this is what we see all the time. We see this with small customers. We've seen this with some really large customers who didn't understand the implications of this. What they do is then they start using JavaScript, because with the Power BI report or with the dashboard, you can apply filter criteria. So what they do is they build a report that has some filter criteria, and then they use some JavaScript to dynamically apply some conditions to that, and then they use JavaScript to hide those filters so that the user sees a report in the context of them. And that's typically what people are expecting. When they think of Power BI integrated with Power Pages, they think, hey, my users log in and they see reports and they see dashboards in the context of the user that's logged in. With publish to web, that is not the way you that's not, there's no way to do that securely, because the only real way to do that is by adding parameters to your report that you can pass in via the query string essentially. And then those are essentially parameters that someone could check on or check off. And the people might use JavaScript to hide those, so make it a little bit more difficult for someone who may not know what they're doing to bring those back. But anyone who does know what they're doing can easily add those filters back or stop the code from running that hides those filters, uncheck the boxes, and now they see everyone's data. So please do not think that using filters and then hiding the filters plain with JavaScript is a secure way to embed Power BI on your Power Pages site. It is not. So publish to web should really only be used in situations where everyone, whether they're logged in or not to Power Pages, should see the same data, the same report, and have access to the same stuff. So if that's your use case, it's great. I honestly, that's very rare in my experience. There are cases where it's kind of a site for public use and everyone can see the same report. I was just camping over the weekend, and we were looking at a Power BI dashboard that showed us where all the fire bans were. Unfortunately, we were replaced with a fire ban, so we couldn't have a fire at our camping. But that's an example where it's like, hey, this is a dashboard that everyone should see. Well, that will work, but keep in mind that there's no way with publish to web to secure the data and make it contextual to your user. There's no way to securely do that, so please don't try. So publish to web is easy, no additional licensing. You're kind of covered with the Power BI Pro license that was required to create the report to begin with, but not an option for per user or kind of context specific reports. So embed for your organization. So this works and allows you to create secure reports that can take in the context of the current person, but under a very specific limited set of circumstances. So embed for your organization assumes that you are using Azure, Azure AD or Entra ID for the login into your Power Pages site. Then it expects that your users are licensed for Power BI. And then what you're doing is you're essentially embedding as an iframe your Power BI report on Power Pages, and you're using the fact that Power BI uses Entra ID and your Power Pages site uses Entra ID for authentication. So you use the context of that user that's logged in, their existing Azure AD or Entra ID authentication to show your report. So this usually only makes sense in the context of an internal portal, or if you happen to be creating a portal that you're creating accounts for the people who are logging in your main Entra ID account, and you're going to license all of those users for Power BI. So in my experience, that's relatively limited. That there's some organizations that have licensed kind of their users for Power BI, and so they can log into a portal and they can see that. But again, it probably doesn't match the primary use case where people are looking for, hey, my customers are going to log into this portal and want to see a report that's for them. This is not that. Unless you're giving those people Azure AD accounts or Entra ID accounts and licensing them, this is not the answer for you either. The answer that you're looking for is embed for your customers, and this leverages Power BI Embedded. Now, Power BI Embedded is basically a service. It runs actually in Azure, and so you don't pay per user for Power BI Embedded. You pay for essentially a unit of compute, basically. So you're basically paying for a specific Power BI Embedded server that runs. And basically, the licensing works in such a way that anyone can access that Power BI Embedded server because you're paying for the server itself, and anyone can view the reports and the dashboards that are being run off of it. And so that's the way that you would expose those to your customers. You turn on you leverage Power BI Embedded. You upload your report and your dashboards to Power BI Embedded to your Power BI Embedded server, and then you can put those on your Power Pages site. There's no additional licenses required for the portal users specifically, but know that Power BI Embedded itself is not inexpensive. Depends on your region and all that sort of stuff, but it's thousands of dollars per month. It's not $10. It's not $100. I believe it starts somewhere $1,000, $2,000 per month, and goes up from there depending on what type of resources you have. So it is not a small commitment. It is something that you need to consider. Again, this is what I think most people are expecting when they think of a Power Pages and Power BI integration. And unfortunately, there's a bit of sticker shock when they look at the cost of, wait, to do the thing I thought was included is going to cost me an extra $2,000 a month. Like, what's that about? So that would be, if you take away one thing from this session today, is if you want external customers to use Power BI on your Power Pages site, you got to be keeping in mind that they most likely will need Power BI embedded licensing. So if you're going to there is one checkbox that you can click to basically enable the Power BI visualizations, which work for the publish to web and the publish for your organization or embed for your organization. And then there's another one that says, hey, I want to enable Power BI embedded. Then what you have to do is you have to essentially enable the user that's running your Power Pages site. You have to give it the access in Power BI. You have to give it essentially the rights to access the Power BI APIs. So the way that you do that is you actually create a security group in Entra ID. So you create a security group in Entra ID. You add the application user, the app registration that Power Pages runs under, and you can refer to its application ID to gather that. So you can get that ID. You can add that user to that security group, and then you add that security group to the list of users or groups that are allowed to run the Power Page or that are able to access the Power BI APIs. And we'll look at that here in a second. So you need to perform those steps, a few extra steps. I know that process is pretty well documented. We've run into situations where if the same user doesn't perform all of those steps, it can sometimes go a little bit haywire. So in an ideal world, you have a single global admin who has the ability to create the security role, add the user to the security role, access Power BI, add the user to like all that sort of stuff. If you have one global admin that can do all of that, that's your best chance to not run into issues. We have seen it where someone can maybe create the security roles, but they can't add you to Power BI embedded, and that can cause some issues. So that'd be one tip is to, if you can, use one user to do all of the steps to set up that Power BI. Now, again, the great benefit of doing it, okay, so just watching the questions here. So Mike says Fabric is a cheaper option than Power BI embedded for getting an embedded workspace. Okay, so it could be that this, this new Fabric stuff, which again, to be honest, I'm not familiar with that, is if that gets you like a real Power BI embedded workspace, that might be a cheaper option. He's saying it starts at $300 a month. So if that kind of gets you the same Power BI embedded workspace, then great. Looks like there might be a better option out there. Adrian asked, will Power BI embedded work with local accounts? The answer is yes, and I'll explain how that works here. So the Power BI embedded doesn't care what type of authentication you're using, because the way that it can understand the context of the user is it uses row-level security. So row-level security is a feature within Power BI that allows you to perform essentially the kind of security trimming on a per kind of row basis. And the way you do that is with DAX. DAX is one of the kind of languages within Power BI. And again, if you're a Power BI person, I'm probably, not saying it exactly right, but effectively that's kind of how it works. So what you can do is you can essentially write filter criteria for your rows. And the big key is that within DAX, there's a username function, and that will return you the ADX underscore identity underscore username field from of the currently logged in contact. So think of it as effectively the username of the contact is passed in to Power BI, and then you can perform all your filtering that way. So you can say, I want to show all my, if it's a list of say accounts that contact is related to, you can kind of build into your row level security because you have not the ID of the contact, but the username of the contact to perform your security trimming. And also keep in mind that that's within Power BI. In order to do the row level security, you need to have roles enabled in Power BI and make sure that when you're doing that integration, you are enabling the roles. And so I'll go through that here in a second. Okay, so embed for your customers. Again, that's what most people I think are expecting when they want to use Power BI with Power Pages. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on, because honestly, those other two options are pretty straightforward. If you want to publish to web, it's pretty easy. You create your report. Publish to web is, it's basically a button in there where you publish to web. You get the URL. You can embed that in Power Pages. The other one, again, with the Azure AD, there's not much you have to do in terms of security because it's more kind of native Power BI. The Power BI embedded is really what I think most people are looking for when it comes to Power Pages. So let's look at how some of this stuff is set up. So I'm going to start with right here, the Power Pages, Power Platform Admin Center. So I'm going to load up the config. Now I've already kind of turned on everything, but I'll just kind of quickly show you where that works. So the first step when you're working with Power BI is to enable those things. So I'm in the Power Platform Admin Center. I've gone under resources into Power Pages site, and I've opened up my particular Power Pages site. Under services, you'll see that essentially there's two toggles. So the first one is that Power BI visualization. That needs to be enabled for any of the Power BI options. And then the second one here is the Power BI embedded service, and that needs to be enabled if you're using the Power BI embedded. Once you've enabled Power BI embedded, you can choose which workspaces are enabled. So you can see here I've got a workspace within Power BI embedded for that. I think this is what Mike was kind of mentioning, is that if you can create Fabric, if you can create embedded workspaces in Fabric and they show up here, then that might be a cheaper option than Power BI embedded. But the key is, your workspaces have to show up in this list, and you can say which ones are enabled. So yeah, the configuration is you turn that on, you turn this on. Now this right here, this application ID. If you're not familiar with what this is the ID of the essentially the app registration that's been created in my Entra ID tenant or my Azure AD tenant. It's essentially represents the user. It represents the user that's running my Power Pages site. So if my Power Pages site is going to call over to the Power BI API, it's going to be in the context of this user. So think of this as essentially the ID of the user that runs my Power Pages site. Then if we go into, so here's my Power BI embedded. If I go into my Microsoft Entra ID, I'm just going to go back here. I'm just going to say see all. I'm just going to copy this. And then if I go into app registrations, just to kind of show you what that looks like. If I search for that ID, not owned, so let me go here. You'll see I've got Power Apps Portals, NHPAP, that's the name of my site. So this is that particular user. Now, if I look at groups, what I did was I created a group, 6 group found. So I created this group here called NHPAP Power BI Embedded. So it's just kind of a regular Azure security group. And what I've done is I've added as a member of my group my particular that user account, essentially that app registration. So I just went add members. I pasted in the ID that I had and added that to that account. So I created just a simple Azure AD Azure AD Entra ID security group, added the user to that. And then once I did that, I'm just trying to find the right screen here. I may not. Oh yeah, here we go. Close. I then go into my developer settings. Oh no. So I go into here. Where did we go? Thought it was in here. Oh, sorry, admin portal. So somewhere in here. Tenant settings, no, tenants wouldn't be in there, premium. Somewhere in here, there's a thing called developer settings. Power BI embed. I feel like they changed this since last week when I was in here. Anyway, somewhere in here, there is a place where you can say which security roles are allowed to access the APIs. Admin portal, premium per user, 10 cents. Yeah, also it's export and sharing. There we go. So right here, so service principals that can use the APIs, and I said, hey, this group. So if you're in this group, which our app user is, then you're able to access the APIs. So you just need to do that because otherwise, when Power Pages starts talking to Power BI Embedded, it's not going to be authorized. So you kind of need to do that setup in order to get that thing in the to get kind of the security. Once you have that, I'm going to head over to the Design Studio, and I'm going to click the plus button. I've already got one there, but you'll see that Power BI is one of the components that you can add here. So when I go to Edit Power BI, you have the option. So I want to publish to web, in which case they're going to just ask you, give me the URL that they would have given you when you publish to web. It's really just that simple. You say embed for your organization. Now I haven't, you'll see here, I got my workspace. I can select from my reports and dashboards. I believe I've got a report here. That's the report I did. I can show the pages. I can apply the filters. I can say done. And this is going to embed it. But again, it's going to assume that what I'm logging in with is Azure AD. And it's going to have, and so this will technically work in this case because I am logging in with Azure AD. But that's not going to be the typical use case. What most people I think are going to want is embed for your customer. Again, you're going to select your workspace, dashboard or report. I'll say report, do this. I can select my page. And this is what I talked about earlier. You're going to want to say apply roles. If you're doing the role level security, you need to do that. Now, let me show you the actual Power BI report that I've created. Again, please do not, if you're going to snicker about my terrible Power BI reports, do it quietly. Well, all I did here was create a simple report. I've connected over to Dataverse using the Dataverse connector. I'm pulling in the contact table and I'm showing the first name. I'm also showing the contact ID, and I'm showing the, this is the ADX underscore identity underscore username column here, just kind of as a proof of concept. Now, when we talk about the role level security, this is where we go to manage roles. And you can see I've created a new role here called PP users. And what I've done here is I said, show me only the users where their username is equal to this particular function. So this is the DAX syntax that I was referred to earlier. So when this report loads on the portal, I only want to show rows where the username, which is this column here, matches this username, which is going to be equal to the username of the person who's logged in. So while in Power BI Desktop, I can see all these people. If I go over to my report, I'm just going to remove this one. If we just edit this one, you'll see what I've done here is I've just picked this, and then I've said for this one, apply the role of PP users. If I didn't include this particular role, it wouldn't include that role in the role level security. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to preview this. And we're going to see what that gives us. We should then only see one row in our database, in our report. Yeah. So you can see it's done the filtering server side. Like there's no way, there's nothing in here I can break around. This is what I was talking about earlier, that filters pane. So you can see that other data like just literally doesn't exist to this user. Whereas what we see some people do is they'll embed it so that all the contacts are in there, and then they'll use JavaScript or query string parameters to check some of these, and then simply just like hide this pane so that the user doesn't have access. But it is very simple for a developer who knows what they're doing to re-enable that pane to make it show up, and then they can remove any of that filtering. So it's not secure to just kind of hide this pane and to apply your filtering using JavaScript. So role level security is the way to do that. Again, in most cases, are you wanting to just show the contact? No, you're going to have to create your Power BI reports and all of the data in such a way that you're constructing your roles based off of being able to use this filter data, this username function based on the contact who's logged in. So you can join contacts to accounts, and maybe it's a nice report for their support cases. So you can join over to their support cases, and you can do all this kind of fancy logic, knowing that you can tie it back to show me all the data where the username of the person who's logged in is the same as the username on that contact record. So that's kind of the special magic here, is that if you just did a regular embed without using the kind of the liquid tag in Power BI, in Power Pages, this username function would not get populated properly. So that's the magic that Power Pages is doing for you, is that they are appropriately setting this username field when you do that embed. Just as I mentioned earlier, it is simply just a liquid statement. So if I were to just go and edit code on this one, we'll take a quick look at the liquid that it creates. It's relatively simple liquid. It uses the Power BI. Okay, let me just close a few things here. Try to do this, see if they've got, yeah. Still no Copilot for those of us in Canada. That's okay. Let me find that Power BI tag here. So here's our Power BI liquid tag. Tag's called Power BI. Usually there's kind of just a few parameters. The first one is what's the authentication type, And those are our three types. There's the Power BI embedded, which is embed for your customers. There's Azure AD, which is the embed for your organization. And then there's the publish to web. So that's kind of your one option here. The UI that they give you is really helpful because it generates this link for you. You'll notice that I didn't have to figure out what's the ID of my report and my page and all that sort of stuff. That's what that UI did for me. So when I was able to just click through here, and like these drop downs, they're required because they're generating that URL that we see in here for this path. So that's what's super helpful. But again, if you went into Power BI embedded and you looked at your thing, you'd be able to see that. And then you can see here, it's just passing in this role of PP users because that's what we're doing for the row level security. So not incredibly complicated to create the liquid command yourself. Again, the path is probably the thing that it saves you the most time, just gathering all those different IDs that are necessary for pointing at the right one. I know before we had the power or this integration into the design studio, it was often there's like a different team building the report. So you'll say, okay, I just need to know what the URL is for the report to embed it on here. And it sometimes took a few emails back and forth to get the exact right URL with the IDs. So it's certainly convenient to be able to just pick from the drop-down list and the appropriate names and not have to worry about figuring out what those IDs are. Okay, question here from Hamid. Sorry for but essentially Fabric is an authentication middle that allows me to allow APIs to be used by security organizations. I would be lying if I pretended to even know to even try to give an explanation as to what Fabric is. So I wish I had a better answer than that, but I do not feel capable, or I don't feel comfortable answering that question because I really, we've used Fabric. I personally use Fabric a little bit, but it's not an area of expertise, especially as compared to Power BI embedded or the Fabric workspaces. It seems to be like a place where a lot of stuff can go, and then you can pull stuff from it when you need it. But that's about the best I could do at this point. Okay, so that essentially is what we want to cover. Again, the big thing is don't forget about the licensing and the security. The Power BI embedded is most likely the way that most customers are going to want to go because that allows you to do that row level security so that you can securely actually show data that's relevant to the person who's logged in. That's the thing that gets overlooked. People just see, yes, it's integrated. They just assume that they don't have to pay anything extra for it, that it's just going to work. And it's not that it doesn't just work. It's really just the licensing side of things. I think people wouldn't be so concerned about building out the row level security. I think they kind of expect that. They just don't realize that that's kind of an add-on product and not included with the integration. So don't forget about the licensing and do it securely. Don't use publish to web and then put some parameters using JavaScript. That's a bad idea. Adrian's asking, are there any lightweight / cheaper alternatives to Power BI reporting in portals? So kind of the free version of reporting in the portals would be to use a combination of lists and charts. So when a customer comes to us and says, hey, we want a dashboard on our portal, our go-to kind of cheap alternative is using Bootstrap kind of columns. We can create and Liquid. We can create a combination of charts, which there's a Liquid tag for charts that come from model-driven apps. So you can put charts in there, and you can embed lists in there, and you can do some pretty nice looking layouts that way. So that's kind of the free included in the product version. Otherwise, there's JavaScript libraries that can do certain charting things. So that's also another alternative. If the customer doesn't come from a background where they have a lot of Power BI kind of experience in-house, then it can make sense just to do some kind of simple charts, like the Java, like the chart.js libraries out there. They can do some really fancy things. In the end, even Power BI, like it's all just kind of a JavaScript charting library. So there are some alternatives that way. So that's kind of what we go at. Like, so the first level I would say is just using lists and charts that exist within Liquid and within Power Pages. Next level from there is kind of some custom, using a charting library that's kind of a third-party one. And then if that, if you want to go to Power BI, you can go from there. Okay, I think I've addressed all the questions. Okay, so I just want to talk about our next call will be August 29th. We will have a guest speaker returning, another member of the engineered code team. Jacob Chapman will be back. I believe the plan is to talk about basically how plugins work with Power Pages. So if you're using plugins like, there's caching implications and, async versus sync, all that sort of stuff. So we'll be kind of doing a deep dive on, if you're familiar already with Dataverse plugins, and if you want to write one of those, kind of what you should know about Dataverse plugins and how they work with Power Pages. So that's the plan for August 29th. Again, I want to say thanks to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for helping us with these calls. So I will give us another couple of minutes here if anyone has any questions. I don't see any outstanding ones right now, but I will give people another minute here in case there are additional questions. Again, whether it's about today's topic, Power BI, or any other topic related to Power Pages, my thoughts on the current Canadian Football League. We've got the Open Championship going right now, which I think Rory McIlroy is failing terribly at. So I'm open to talk about any of those topics. Okay, well, I don't see any additional questions, so I think we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank everyone for joining me in, I guess if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, what's the middle of your summer? Hopefully it was worth your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll see you all in August. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining us today.